they're deploying all kinds of assets to the area, and also deploying assets away from the area. Things that would be vulnerable. For example, I think all the ships that were the U.S. naval vessels docked at Bahrain have left because they know that all those ships could be easily sunk. They're very within range of even short range missiles fired from Iran. So they're leaving, but at the same time, like the USS Nimitz is steaming its way to the region, and other air refueling tankers and all kinds of other planes are being flown into Europe and into the Middle East. So yeah, those kind of deployments take time, and it may be just nothing more than that. It's just something that they're going to do, but they were told, maybe Trump was told by the Pentagon, yeah, give us 5 more days or give us a week or, whatever. And then we'll be able to, we'll have everything in place and we can do it. That's one possibility. But again, we just never know with Trump. I'm sick of talking about this guy, but we have to because, the consequences of his actions are huge. In this case, it could be catastrophic. And he is on record many times, like criticizing previous presidents for pushing us close to war with Iran. It's been a part of his campaign stump speeches. It was the sort of thing, I'm going to keep you out of stupid wars in the Middle East. Going all the way back to the 2016 campaign. I remember when he attacked the other Republican candidates for supporting the Iraq war. That's been part of what has made him popular. It's not all of it, not by a long shot, but it is part of what's made him popular. And there are a lot of murmurings, a lot of, from the base and from representatives of the base like Tucker Carlson, clearly very, very angry about this. And I think it's his own instinct. He doesn't like the idea of getting involved. I think he got talked into this. Again, it's no excuses. Of course, he's the president. He shouldn't have let this happen, but he did. And it's his fault because of the people he's put around him. But he may be getting cold feet right now. I just started to think about, this could be really bad. This could hurt me. This could make me unpopular. I'm afraid he's not really concerned about the millions of people who might die, but he may be concerned about his legacy and his own popularity. But I think the smart money is that he'll do it.
Right. I mean, if he stops now, his legacy's over. His legacy's over no matter what. This destroyed it. I don't see, and in his mind, and this is the problem that happens once you get in a war, the only way you can save your legacy is total victory. And then that means you have to constantly go up the escalation ladder. That's what we're seeing, with Netanyahu, with Zelensky. They become in this desperate position. And so that's what we don't want to get. And hopefully there will be, if that does happen, there will be some type of checks and balances that our system is supposed to have to allow us to stop it internally. But the thing is, if he stops now, Israel is done, right? What right now, Israel is just getting hit without the United States, and they're being protected by the full force of the West. All the Western European countries, Jordan, Qatar, all of the Mideast vassals, and they're getting hit hard. It seems like the air defenses are really failing in Israel. Is that true? Do you know the state of it?
Yeah, it's hard to say. The thing is, I'll read one thing and then I'll read a contrary report elsewhere, and it kind of depends on which media ecosystem that you're in. One thing is there are strikes, missiles getting through. There's no doubt about it, and striking targets in Israel, and the impacts are large. You can see it. Not only that, it's not just the Iranians that are succeeding in striking Israeli targets, but the Israelis have committed, I think, 3 self-goals too, where their own air defense just went up in the air and then came back and fell back on Tel Aviv or whatever city it was fired from. I've seen 3 of those videos, or at least 2, and I've heard there's a third. So yeah, they're getting through. They're getting damage is being done, but the Israelis continue to strike targets within Iran, and they're doing damage there. And it's just really hard to make an accurate assessment. Now there is, the Iranians are controlling what's shown, and but the Israelis are equally so. Israel has very severe military censorship. And one thing you notice that like the videos that you see are taken by citizens within these cities, places like Haifa and Tel Aviv. But you hear that, for example, military bases have been struck, and or research facilities that are out in the desert, and you don't see those because again, military censorship is preventing us from seeing it. So we just don't know the extent of the damage. But damage has been done clearly, and some significant damage. Now there has been a real fall off in the number of missiles that Iran has launched towards Israel. It was declining rather sharply. I think maybe there was a little bit of an uptick last night. But the danger, I think, on the Iranian side is, we assume, I think rightly, that they have lots of missiles, that they probably still have thousands to go. That's what most people seem to assume. But they have a more limited number of launchers, and the Israelis did destroy some of them, again, through this covert operation of theirs. And the question is, how many have they destroyed? How much has that? That would be a real bottleneck, and it would actually, really limit Iran's ability to respond. Now, but Israel has its problems too. Oh, and then though it's clear that the Iranian counterintelligence is having some success now in rolling up that network. You hear they've been they have located some of these drone assembly points, and they have arrested dozens, and I think they executed some of them already, quite understandably. Not exactly Mossad agents, but Mossad collaborators. But still, this network is still in place. It's obviously, it's been partially neutralized, but it's still there and it's still doing damage. There's continued to be assassinations. One general is replaced, and then his replacement gets assassinated, and that reminds you of what happened in Lebanon. So this is a serious problem. I mean, the Iranians have a serious problem. This is not an easy fight for them. Let's make that clear. But on the Israeli side, they clearly have their problems. One thing we've learned is, first of all, these Iranian missiles are sophisticated. I think maybe Hezbollah's capabilities were exaggerated. At least we really didn't see any very sophisticated missiles from them. But Iran's missiles clearly are. Some of them, if they're not true hypersonic, they're very close to it. Some of these you come in at just tremendous speeds and have very large warheads. I think like a half a ton or something, and they can do a lot of damage. Those warheads again are a lot larger than those air launched missiles that Israel has. I think you have to say that overall the Israeli air defense system has done well. It's just it's been, but no air defense system is perfect, and the number of interceptors we know is limited. The Israelis themselves have said that they only have 10 to 12 days worth of interceptors left, and then they're out, and then they're just completely exposed. Now, maybe by that time, the same will be true of Iran, but again, in an equal fight, Iran is just so much larger, so much more land area, so much more population. It seems to me that as long as they can have the launchers and they have their silos still can operate, they will continue to do damage. And in the long-term fight, like we said earlier, I think the advantage clearly goes to Iran. It's not. I won't say that it's clear that Iran's going to win this because again, I think especially because of this covert network. And there is a risk. There's no signs of it happening now, but there is a risk of civil conflict or within Iran. I think a lot of these that's what the Israelis are pushing for. They want to see something like what happened in Syria. They always encourage conflict in places like Lebanon, and they've had success in those countries. We have to say, but so far Iran is held together, and instead of people turning on the government, it's quite the reverse. People, even people who were lifelong enemies of the government, are rallying to the cause, and I think that that's what we can expect. So on that score, it looks like the prospects for Iran are good, but we're not even a week into this. It's going to be a long, tough fight. If you would ask me to place a bet, absent a U.S. intervention, I would say the advantage just goes to Iran. But I can't be 100% certain. There are these question marks about the number of launchers and about the effectiveness of that covert network. But still, I think it's just Israel is has picked a fight with again, a formidable opponent, and it came out swinging and landed some sharp blows, but this will go, to extend the analogy, the metaphor here, another 15 rounds, and if it does, if it does so, I think in the end, Iran will be the victor. I think another thing to consider is not just the military capacities, but the political question. If in the end, let's say it goes the so-called 15 rounds, and then the fight's over, it's just sort of like the mutual exhaustion. Both sides have run out of missiles, and it just ends there. That could happen, but who wins at that point? I'd have to say Iran, because they didn't pick the fight, and their people understand that. The world outside of the collective West understands that. So morally, they won it. And then it would also be clear, I think, again, if the U.S. doesn't intervene, that Israel has failed. Its stated objectives is to destroy the military or the nuclear program in Iran. They will have failed at that point. And they will, and this is a failure that resulted in a great deal of destruction with Israel. That's going to, I think, quite naturally at that point, the people are going to turn their anger within Israel towards their own government. And again, the stated objective, of course, was destruction of the nuclear program, but the unstated, not so unstated, but clearly, because actually, the Israeli leaders have been more or less saying this. The unstated objective is regime change. And if they fail in that, you say, okay, you launched this war, you didn't achieve your objectives. Entire blocks of Tel Aviv have been obliterated. We've been shown to be, vulnerable. This was kind of the myth of Israel of Israeli invincibility has ended. And what did you achieve? Nothing.